Good evening. Welcome to our City Council meeting Monday, October 4th, 2021. Thank you for being here this evening. We'll start it off with the invocation and pledge allegiance. God of justice and mercy, thank you for the opportunity to serve our community and ultimately the gift of life. Help us to listen with goodwill and understanding tonight. Also help us to act with character and conviction. Finally, give us strength to make this life better for all. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we'll just jump right in with public session, and I'm going to turn it over if you're ready. Good. I knew you did. Yeah, I pulled my mask up. So.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? I don't know about you all, but it's a little chilly and a little wet outside. So, but this is time for public session. So if you'd like to make any comments tonight, anything that's not on the agenda in our for our policies and discussion items. So if you have something you'd like for us to hear, this is your time to do so. And for those who are listening, you can call in. The number is 653-9886. Each person who would like to speak will have about 3 minutes. So, sir, it looks like you have something you'd like to say. Come on to the podium. And can you give your name and where you live, and then you'll have the sign in as well.
Yes, my name is John Crowley. I live at 111 Gregory Street in Clemson. Nothing major. I just wanted to, I guess, formally bring it up in front of the council that I think it's probably time that the city revisit its animal laws and bring those up to discussion and probably update them. Going over those versus what the county has, it seems like the town is severely lacking. I think it would probably work well even if we just simply adopted what they have to replace ours. I know there'll be some stuff in there that needs to come out because hunting is obviously not allowed in the city limits. But there's things in there that, like just even a basic definition of what an owner is, what constitutes an animal, something that addresses property damage. They've got it decently laid out, but I just kind of wanted to formally bring it up here because I've heard people bounce it around, but I haven't actually heard it brought up. So I would just like to encourage the council to possibly take some time to look into updating that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Yes, sir.
Eric Newton, 235 West Old Pendleton Road. Mr. Mayor, council members. So Monday next week, I'm going before the Planning Commission to present my case for rezoning a little 0.4 acre parcel on the corner of Berkeley Drive and Highway 93. Some of you may or may not remember, but it was part of the Cambridge Creek project that I did there on Highway 93 and Cambridge and Berkeley Drive. And the year period has come and gone. It's probably been a year and a half now. And as many of you probably know, the project's near completion. But we were wanting to build another. We had designed it to put one additional structure there, a 4-unit building there, and I would like to go ahead and do that while we still have construction going on. So I was talking to some of the staff members earlier last week, and we brought up, or I asked if there was any way that we could expedite the process. And what I would like to ask of you, humbly ask of you, is to maybe consider advertising the public hearing for the council meeting that will be coming up later in the month, so that we can potentially speed the process up for potentially getting it approved for rezoning. So if y'all would consider that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Can I ask you a question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
What are you, so on the same property, the same?
It's the same triangular piece, and nothing's changed from when we submitted it last time. So it's zoned R20. Everything around it is, the Cambridge Creek property is RM3 or PD. So it's on an island. It's R20. Nobody's ever going to build a house there. So we just want to make it RM3 so we can put another building there.
So another apartment building there, not
Townhouse building.
townhouse.
Mm-hmm. So it's zoned R20, and literally everything around it is either RM3 or PD.
I understand. When you say building, I just thought maybe you were putting something else for that development.
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, it's a same style built, just a 4-unit building.
And that's that little triangle right at the corner, right before you get to Fuller Estate Drive.
Right. And last time it passed, if I remember correctly, I think it went through Planning Commission 6-1 vote, and then council, no public comment, public hearing, and then passed the first reading, and then it didn't pass the second reading for whatever reason. So I think it is probably the highest and best use for the parcel, and I'd like to speed up the process. I mean, I think we're all pretty familiar with it, and I was just trying to, push it along a little faster, and I was told that that's well within my right to ask for y'all to advertise it sooner so we can speed it up. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? May I have back over? Turn it back over to you. This will end our public session.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next, we'll go to the possible approval of minutes. And would somebody like to make a motion for the September 20th minutes that have been published?
I'll make a motion that we approve our September
20th.
20 minutes.
Second.
Second. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. All right. Unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll go into reports and discussion agenda item. First item is to discuss amending City Code Section 937 sanitation, garbage, and trash collection to affirm and clarify that the residential sanitation fee is a mandatory uniform service charge with no opt-out and choose to cover costs associated with the management of residential solid waste services, including collection and processing of recyclable materials and the collection, transport, handling, and landfilling of residential solid waste. Heather, that was a long one.
That was a lot.
So
Well, basically, you summed it up right there.
no, I'm sorry. I read it, so I did what I was supposed to do. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank y'all.
Appreciate it.
Basically, the issue's been raised that whether we can legally require residents to pay on private streets the uniform service charge for residential sanitation. And they're either voluntarily opting out, or we cannot run on those streets because the streets weren't built to city standards. So we want to amend that ordinance to clarify that all residents receive that charge, whether they're on a public or a private street. In doing so, to make it mandatory, the service charge will avoid all kinds of administrative nightmares as far as trying to pick and choose who actually receives that service charge, and also people on the ground. They don't know who gets a service charge or not, who gets roll cart pickup. So we really need to clarify that in the amendment or in the ordinance, so it states that they do receive that, whether it's private or public.
How many families would you estimate are impacted or affected this month?
How many families?
Or how many residents, or how many incidents, I guess is a better word?
Right now, I think we have about 10 private roads. and they range anywhere from probably 20 houses to 133. So,
So you're saying on in one particular road, there might be as many as over 100?
I'm sorry?
There might be as many as 100 on one
Correct.
particular road?
Correct.
They're already being charged the fee now. This is just making it clear that the reading the ordinance actually explicitly says that all citizens will be charged.
So they're all being charged now?
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is just to clear it up to make sure that everyone understands that.
Has there been pushback on it? Is that why we're clearing it up?
Yeah, we've been getting some calls from customers who are in areas where we have allowed for not a private street necessarily, but for a street to not be built up to city standards prior to when y'all changed that. And they're like, well, we've got this residential, we've got a private service with it, so why are we paying for the city service as well? Well, they have to pay our fee plus the one on top of it. However, if there is a customer out there who doesn't like the private service, we would still go out and serve them. They're not excluded by any means.
So you're saying that some of these residents are paying a private contractor to pick it up now?
Or it's added into a lease payment or a rent structure, and it's included. They've got the private sanitation as a contract part of their.
But, I mean, are we in a position now to actually serve those residents even
Yes,
though
we can.
we can actually go down those roads even though they're not to standard?
They're not necessarily built to city standard, but built to city standard can mean a lot of different things. It can mean the right of way isn't to our standard. Sometimes in the past we have allowed modifications there to allow for additional development to take place on the site that couldn't happen because we've taken up too much of the land. It could be that the streets weren't built or we didn't observe a pump test to make sure that the compaction was correct, those types of things. But a fire truck can get down any of these streets.
I guess
So,
just
garbage
asking a
truck could
different
as
way.
well.
Just asking if when they opt out of their private service and the city service, we're not going to deny them.
No.
I think that's kind of where you're going.
Well, kind of, but I guess I'm also sitting thinking maybe some situations where an HOA is basically requiring the private service and, you know, I mean, I'm not opposed to this at all. I'm just, looking at all the different pieces of it. So, but there might very well be a situation where an HOA's got their own deal going and, the customer or the resident may be somewhat trapped.
Well, they can go hire whoever they like to provide the service. It's just putting that they still have to pay the fee that we have.
I'm fine. Okay.
So if we approve this now, could people who've been paying up to this point want their money back, saying up until this point apparently it wasn't required and now it is, why have we been paying you?
It's actually the reverse. It has always been required.
But it's been required in the zoning, or we just collecting it? It's required in the ordinances, or we just been collecting the money?
I think it was the long-term practice, and arguably it is required under the different things in the statute. We just want to make it absolutely clear. So when you come in as a new customer, you're not going to say, oh, by the way, I don't want to pay this or I don't want to pay that. They're going to understand that if I get water and sewer, I'm going to have to pay this solid waste fee as well.
So just so I'm clear then, no one can go, once we pass this, and come to City Hall and say, you just approved this required payment last week, but I've been paying it for the last 2 years, I want my money back. That's not a scenario.
No, it's in there. It says that the use of roll carts is mandatory. We just need to make it perfectly clear that it's private and public.
So private is not perfectly clear right now, or it is perfectly
It's just I don't know when it was in 2000 and
They
the last
can
time
use
it
it
was,
in
it's just
addition
very
to our
dated.
service if they like, but it's not, you don't get to opt out of our fee because that fee covers more than just the roll cart pickup. It handles
Recycling.
recycling, the brush pickup, the landfill fees that everyone uses regardless if you are using our curbside pickup.
Appliances, I forgot about them.
Other questions for Heather? Thank you, Heather. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have the chief consider the city attorney draft of an ordinance to prohibit open carry of firearms at open public events. Thank you, chief, for being here.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. As you're aware, the state law recently was amended to allow for open carry under the open, I forget what the act is called. I put a hard copy of guidance given by SLED on each of your desks prior to, sorry, I meant to email it. I also emailed you examples of ordinances that other jurisdictions have put into play. And basically, one example I'll give is coming up in a couple of weeks, we have the trick or treat event that's going to be downtown on College Avenue. Well, right now, if the city doesn't put the proper signage up when we close the road, we can't prohibit somebody who has a concealed weapons permit from openly carrying a firearm into that area. And in that area, it's for kids, and everybody dresses up, and I just don't need a Wyatt Earp walking in there with a 6-shooter that really goes bang bang walking into something like that. So it's for y'all to consider for policy. Per the state statute, it gives guidance on the signs that we have to put up. They're 3 foot by 4 foot. They have to have a specific statement on there, specific lettering, signs, etc. So it also puts in here, if you go to the last page on the packet that I put on your desk there, it kind of surmises what the local governments can do to prohibit it. So unfortunately, it does not allow us, the city, to pass an ordinance that says, okay, you can't openly carry on any city property or any city park or any location. If you're going to designate an area where someone can't openly carry, you have to do exactly that. Not only you have to designate it, but you have to mark it, you have to put the proper signs up so that there's proper notice that you can't walk in there. So when we close something like College Avenue, or we close Patrick Square, or we do some of those events, we have to establish those areas and we have to put the proper signage up. So what we're just asking for here is what your will is in allowing staff to do those things under what circumstances. I was asked of the ordinances I've seen, which ones do I like the most? I like Columbia's the most. I think, and Mary would have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in there you can give Andy some wiggle room, so there may be an event that we don't want to do that with if it's a city-sponsored event. But under our current permitting process to close streets, if a private individual wanted to close a street, in that permit process, they would have to let us know they don't want open carry to be within that event area, and that would be part of the permitting process. So when they have that ability to say yay or nay, unless you decide you don't want to give them that ability and said if you're going to mark it off, it's going to be for no open carry at all. So there is some ability to give that option to the administrator and his staff when organizing these events. Any questions?
I do have one.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you saying if we do pass ordinance, we have to put the signage up? How would we do that for an event like, if they're going down College Avenue? Are you going to put barriers up, put the signage up, or how would that work?
You would have to put the signs, according to the law, you would have to put the signs wherever the entrance and exits are. So for College Avenue, we normally block it right around Earl Street. So the first sign would be somewhere north or south of Earl Street, and then coming off of 93 would be somewhere there, and we would probably put 1 or 2 in the middle. So there's plenty of notice of whoever's walking in or out of the area, that there would be no concealable weapons allowed. In an open field, you would probably have to, cordon it off, fence it, and in the entrance exit areas, you would have to post the signs where they can see it. It's very specific in the statute. So much so the signs are very large. You cannot you can't put them on a little bifold and put them on the ground. They have to be at least 40 inches off of the ground. They can't be any higher than 96 inches off of the ground. So I spoke with Cody earlier. Depending on what you give direction on us to do will depend on how we put them up. We threw a couple of things around, and we're still thinking about it, but it may be something as we put it on a light pole temporarily while the event's going on, and then take it down, something like that.
So, for example, the deals we've been having at Patrick Square. So, if we go to follow this path, then next Tuesday you should have signage there as well.
If you give us direction and you want to prevent the concealable weapons in there, we would have to post the signs, yes.
Okay. Or anything like that. So, the events we had this summer, or continuing the events down. Okay.
Yeah, especially if we're allowing the open consumption of alcohol, that might be a good idea to limit that.
Does that mean that now after the football games you'll have to do the same thing?
If we close a street off, we would have to do that.
That's just clarification. Right.
If we close the street off, we have to clearly define where they cannot bring weapons into and have the proper signage.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Rick. Glad that you. I look for the number. All right, so 9416. 9416. Are you on the line?
Yes. Hello?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yes, is this the time to actually address the consideration for approval of legal services between the City of Clemson and Miss Mary McCormick? Apologize if I'm not pronouncing it right.
It's later in the agenda.
Yeah, is it?
It's the consideration for the attorney's contract.
Okay. We actually will be discussing that a little bit later on. Can you stay on the line, if that's okay, Rick? Or do we need to? Okay.
Yes, sure.
So
that's no problem.
We'll make sure we call you back out when that discussion item. That will actually be, it's it's
A under
policy. Yeah, it's policy and action agenda. So it will be shortly. I can't tell you the exact time frame, but if you can stay on the line, we'll greatly appreciate it.
Yes, that's no problem. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Chief? Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for the thorough.
I think it's a good idea.
And Mary, you saw which one he recommended with the City of Columbia, or you heard. I shouldn't say saw. So thank you. Next is discuss the redevelopment workshop schedule and possible amendments to strategic plan ordinance number 1. And Andy, you're going to take the lead on this one, I believe.
Yeah, we have Todd here tonight to help answer some questions too, but I added the proposed workshop schedule for October 19th to your packet, and it's on the website now. We are also working on a press release. We're going to use social media advertising to also help us get the word out on this thing. But you'll see that on the schedule, we've included several public input sessions, and we are also going to try to entice people to come out by allowing things to do for kids, so you can bring out the entire family. We're going to have a lot of summer camp type activities, and we are going to have canvases out there. The rec center is going to be partnering with the art center so that the children can paint their vision for the city of Clemson. And those paintings up in here. The meat of the schedule basically has a lot of the planning and code information done approximately the time, if everything goes well, like your deadline. And then after November 20, you're looking at like preparation of deliverables and papers and things of that nature. So anyway, this here's the schedule we've come up with. I had them make this according to keep y'all's deadline in mind as they did it. And anyway, it's here for you guys to discuss.
My only concern, you said you were going to do a press release and all that, is getting the word out. And I mean, major league, because I mean, the success of this is going to be really truthfully based on who attends and how many attend. And it doesn't need to be the same old group of people. It needs to be a broader group of people.
Yeah, we're trying to hit a very big group of people and hopefully new people. We've also sent out a letter to every property owner in that area.
Is this pavilion, I mean, if we have a rainy day like this, is this pavilion going to work?
The rainy day location is Little John Community Center. I have reserved their multi-purpose room if rains a problem.
Okay. And then the owners roundtable, will that be at Nettles as well?
It will, or it'll be over at Little John if it's raining.
Right, but it's scheduled for
Right, it'll all be there.
all at the same location.
Yes, and it's not like we're kicking people out and bringing people in. It's participatory.
Well, please get the word out.
We're going to make a full court press on advertising.
Because that's my concern, is I see one neighborhood roundtable, and that's the only one for the neighborhoods. And so I guess my question is, if I'm part of the public or a property owner or a neighborhood, how are those groups broken out? Do you know?
Well, you have this sheet here?
Yeah.
Okay. They're going to have several tables set up, and we're going to direct you to different places. And there's going to be facilitators. So we can have several things going on at the same time. But largely, you're going to have these people showing up at certain times of day so that we're going to be able to put most of the staff resources on it, the consultant resources on them.
To me, it's been important that there be some opportunity where the different groups come together and have a conversation.
That's a public work session number 1 and number 2. Those are open house type sessions.
Okay.
So is there anything else going on at Nettles? As we saw through conversations with council, parking becomes extremely, that dissuaded people from attending that, and those who did had a challenge getting there. That would be my biggest concern, particularly looking at the public workshop number 2 at night. I mean, we had a total of 4 people other than the council members there, or 5 maybe, because I think one of them had a child there. So if there's something else going on in Nettles, I might suggest making Little John a focal point for that right to bat, because I don't think you want to make it where it's challenging for people to get there.
Right. I'll double check with them. I have run the schedule by Parks and Rec. They didn't express a concern, but I'll pose the question just to specify.
Yeah, I mean, they may have a concern, too. They're used to parking.
We were parking
Right.
all over, yeah.
Andy, I think what John said about advertising this, I think an important part of advertising this, though, is a really clear statement about what this is for. Because I think people aren't going to know why they should come to watch it. They should not. So I think there needs to be a real clear, here's the desired outcome of this. This is the purpose of this. And I'm sure this group has facilitation skills enough to keep them on track. But I think rather than vague, come and talk about what you want, it has to be pretty specific. I think it's clear. Second, I assume every meeting is open to everybody, right? And even though it's not a meeting for me, it's for the uptown property owners. Anyone, this is important answer, I think, maybe Catherine's question. These are not closed meetings.
Any
right?
meeting
Anyone
that
can go
happens
to-
there, anyone can attend any meeting that happens.
And I think that people need to know, even though it's maybe targeted for a group, it's not limited to that group. So it's
That's my
open.
concern.
And then that question is, now, is there a separate meeting for us, or are we expected at all the meetings? Are we allowed at all the meetings? What's our role?
Y'all can come, my understanding is that y'all would pick and choose which of these meetings you wanted to come to.
I guess, are you going towards whether there would be a quorum present at the meeting? Is that what you're kind of?
Well, that's part of it, more through us, but also just what, since ultimately this comes to us, I would want to get as much, I would want to be as involved as I could. As a currently unemployed professor, that's easy for me compared to others. But there also might be some value, I don't remember seeing, if there's a meeting maybe at the beginning just for us, and not only get input, but understand the process.
Well, I got the same question I was going to ask. Well, I'm glad you did, but so for example, the business owners roundtable or the property owners roundtable, I mean, is it appropriate for people other than the property owners to be there?
If they had,
Andy, let me say something. I think we need to talk with development strategies, because having done these things, there are definitely times that you want to have a focus group in the room, and when you don't, sometimes these things will blow up, and it can, blow up the process. So I think we need to talk to them about how open we want some of these to be, and they are providing multiple opportunities for stakeholders in that area to be heard. And if you have a mixture, that voice in an hour, those voices are going to get lost, and extraneous things are going to come into the conversation. So those public workshop sessions are, my guess would be that those are absolutely open. The other ones, with an hour, what it needs, if you're not a property owner in the area defined, if there's time, but for additional input, that's okay, but the primary input is going to be from the group that is identified during that time. And that's not uncommon at all in these types of planning, exercises. So I think we need to check with them before we start making promises about everybody and all these being completely wide open, because they're not. And I don't think that in this, with a focus group, without us being there, or planning commission, that those would be unreasonable, or we would be breaking any ordinances in doing so.
I think
But
maybe
they
the way
have to
that,
be open to the public, though. All these meetings have to be. Now, you could say it purposely, but I would think every one of these meetings has to be open to anyone who wants to go. No?
Absolutely.
I know development strategies will be meeting individually with property owners outside of this meeting that wouldn't be public meetings. They're going to do research with property owners too.
Yeah, I mean, when we hire the consultants to come in, to do the master plan for Nettles, I mean, they've met with staff, they met with other groups without it being advertised or open to the public. I mean, that's not a.
if it's just information gathering, that's certainly permissible, but I think the way to handle the quorum issue is that when Andy advertises the meeting dates, that he says that council members may attend any of these meetings, no voting will take place, but they may be present. And that way, if the public is there, they'll know that that meeting has been advertised that way. And that way, you don't have to say ahead of time, I'm going to go to this meeting and I'm not going to go to that meeting.
Yeah.
In order to avoid a quorum.
I would encourage us, if at these meetings, that we should be flies on the wall if we're there. This is an opportunity for the neighborhoods, the property owners, the business owners, and the public to provide their input. While we'll make the ultimate decision during this process, we're the least important. We've had plenty of input and we have plenty of influence over this. We don't need to be in those meetings throwing our opinions around, because again, that might make the public and the people there not as willing to be open with the consultant, and that's what ultimately I want, is unfiltered opinions among the groups that are there.
Other comments, questions for Andy? Thank you for setting this up. Appreciate you also setting it up after to give people options. I saw the 6 o'clock, so thank you again for covering. It's all hours. So. Any other feedback? All right. Well, we'll go on to staff reports. Before we go into staff reports, if there's anybody here, I'll look around, that's already reported and you want to be home with your family, we certainly understand if you want to leave. I know some Parks and Rec students have to, I think, stay here the whole time.
Y'all are stuck.
But do not feel like you have to. I mean, again, you're welcome to stay, but we also know family is very important. So anyway, I just wanted to interject. So thank you. Andy, staff reports.
Conversations with council report card will be updated tomorrow. I will be in Columbia on Thursday at the South Carolina Community Development meeting. Assistant Administrator Selection Committee is meeting on Wednesday at 2 p.m., so that process is underway. We started talking about our self-insurance plan with our broker this week. As a group, the aggregate looks really good. We performed very well, and they're currently out getting quotes, and they're going to bring those back to Tracy, and we're going to go over them, and then come up with a recommendation and have a workshop with council. That's a meeting set aside for nothing but that purpose, to go through all of these options that'll be available to you, to make sure you fully understand what's going on. October 18th, you've got the final presentation of the Nettles Park Master Plan. The last public meeting we had went very well. I thought the group did a great presentation, and it was clear to me that they really designed around all the public comment that was brought to them, represented it very well. And we have a downtown merchant meeting on October 14th at 2 p.m. The meeting will be at Tigertown Tavern. Y'all are welcome to attend. You have to be careful about your numbers and attendance, of course, but if you plan to attend, let us know so we can work around that. The purpose of that meeting is to talk about downtown parking and some of the recommendations made by the Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting. And what I told the EDAC was that we would take their recommendations to the downtown merchants, as they were the most impacted people, to get their take on these recommendations before we brought them before council. So these will be coming to you with their input.
Thank you very much, Andy. Policy and action agenda for public comments again is 653-9886. 2-minute limit per speaker, but again, 653-9886. The first one is to consider second reading of ordinance for a text amendment to the city code to create a new zoning district R7. And Todd, thank you for being here.
If I could, I tried to get your attention before you started, Robert, but I have two issues before the action item that I need to address. One is a citizen, Natalie Womack, who I believe is here.
Okay.
Right here. Wrote and is interested in doing a fundraiser 5K run, and that the advertising that she's interested in doing would take place in a city right-of-way, and council approved such signage. She still has not received a permit for the event through Parks and Rec, but I think that's because she hasn't been told she needs one. But I'm going to hand out these are the locations. These are suggested. There are two sites. I'll share with you. And then here's a copy of the banner that they're looking at.
I'll share.
Anyway, this came in last week after the agenda had been published, and so in interest of time, I thought I'd bring this to council for you all to discuss tonight. And Ms. Womack is here if y'all have any questions. Who is the? I'm going to ask Ms. Womack.
So these signs, the red dots represent where the signs are going to go?
Yes, and I really would like y'all's opinion as well, if y'all had any other options as well.
I'm sorry.
And if y'all have any other, I wanted to get y'all's opinion as well, if y'all had any other suggestions that y'all think would be helpful.
Is there one sign, our electronic sign, or just another sign in addition to that?
This is any kind of banner or realtor style sign, any directional sign, anything that's temporarily placed in the right of way, council has to approve by vote.
But
Now,
so
you can't vote on this tonight, but you do have a council meeting before her event on the 18th, he could vote on this and have everything in time for her race.
She's advertising for the race at these locations.
Yeah, but is there gonna be enough time for
So
us
it's
to put it
5
out?
days of
Yeah,
advertising.
that only
Yeah,
puts
I
it,
mean,
Oh, okay.
that
this
only
banner's
allows,
gotta go up now if it's gonna be
Yeah.
effective.
Okay.
yeah, you're talking 5
Advertising.
days.
Then you would have to vote to
Add it to the
find-
agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'd have to find that there were exigent circumstances requiring an emergency addition to the agenda by 2/3 vote. And then, if a motion was made to accept it, there would also have to be 2/3 vote on the actual motion.
So they have to qualify as an emergency to.
So is there a group that sponsors this? Is it International Justice Mission group that sponsors this, or what is?
Yes, so International Justice Mission, we're the college chapter of the International Justice Mission as a whole, which is based in DC, and it's the largest anti-human trafficking organization in the world. And so they have different college chapters, and so we're the Clemson college chapter. And so we're hoping to make this a community-wide event.
And will several of the chapters be doing a race on the same day, or is this just us? This is not like a national event.
It's
on
just
that.
Clemson, IJM.
What other questions? And I'll just make a comment that I appreciate you reaching out. She reached out to us 4 weeks ago. Is that something time frame? And then she went straight to Todd, planning and codes to talk about signs. So, but the permit for the park, why you said that's in process? Maybe elaborate on that so everybody understands the time frame. Sorry, just make sure we clarify that.
I was received a mind-expanding education today. Andy pointed out, I didn't know this existed, that if a person, and it makes perfect sense, if a person wants to put on a 5K run, they first have to get a permit from the city approving the route. I know Chief Campos has to weigh in if it's going to start and end in the park. It's just common sense. Anyway, that was the first I'd heard of such a thing. I've never organized a 5K run. And I found out about that today, and that's why I said that Ms. Womack has not had an opportunity to pursue that permit. I think one of the options I heard mentioned was y'all making a motion to add this to the agenda tonight. Before you do, there's another item. If y'all are through speaking about Ms. Womack for right now, the second staff
Before we
report.
do that, Todd, real quick,
Yeah.
on the 5K, I'm gonna look at Chief. We're gonna try to hash some things out real quick. The 5K, can you just keep it in the park? Can you keep it in?
So we talked with Parks and Rec
Right.
races in the park.
So you'll do the 2 laps around like they do for, you probably don't know this, but cross country, they do 2 laps around Nettles. And that's
We have a map. I can send them.
No, that's, I mean,
Okay.
there are a few of us on council and also around here that we're very familiar. We have kids that do the cross country, the 5K.
Yeah.
That's why I want to clarify. So we'll be at Nettles, not to go outside of Nettles. So you're shaking your head, Chief.
As long as it stays contained in the park, it's not going to cause an issue for us.
Thank you.
Is there a cost for the 5K?
Can you say that again?
Is there a cost?
It's $25 for people to register.
Bigger challenge, I see is qualifying this as an emergency and add it to the agenda.
Yeah.
I think that
Yep.
is a bit of a stretch. I mean, I support all that, but I think adding it tonight would be a challenge. Now, I'd be willing to do something if everybody wanted to in between now and then. I think the 18th is too late. But in fairness to the spirit of that, I think that's a challenge.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. We'll be there to do some kind of special call meeting to address it. I agree with you. I don't think we can say it's an emergency, but. maybe we can-
Unfortunately, though, as well, I feel like that's, and apologies, because I'm fine, like, calling special call meetings for this kind of thing is also something that I wouldn't think is a, again, rises to the level of us calling a special call meeting of council to approve this because of timing. So, there's other ways to advertise, so, and I wish y'all the success you know, no, other people may vote otherwise, but I wish y'all the success. But, you know, unfortunately, I just think that the timing's bad, and this certainly doesn't rise to the level of an emergency to get it on an agenda, to get it on the sign and those kind of things. So I would be opposed to us doing that, or else so I'm going to have every other event that could be like, oh, well, you did it, you know, special call or that kind of thing. That's not a great precedent for us to set unless we're willing to do that for everything that walks through the door.
So maybe what we could do is, instead of that, you just would have to advertise, but maybe you would show this on the agenda for the 18th, because the right-of-way signs just will acknowledge and make it that this is still a time.
Yeah.
But if we do the advertising ahead of time, then we can have it on the agenda for the 18th.
But we can still get it. It just doesn't give you a whole lot of time before the race.
And
To
maybe
do it
with the chamber as well, educate the tourism in some areas, and some of our civic clubs, put out some information also. In fact, you can probably email all of us, I know we have such a meeting tomorrow, I can make an announcement there, different things to come.
But the signage could be on anyone's private property. If you want to put a sign in my front yard, you're welcome to do that. There are maybe other people who let you put your signs in their front yard, and you don't need any permission to do that other than the person's front yard, I guess. So if the issue is the signs, I agree with your point, Rob. You can put signs up anywhere you want in the city on private property as long as the owner agrees, right? I don't know who lives there or has property here. My guess would be you would find people willing to let you put signs up in the same general area if you just knock on the door and ask them, or ask your friends. So I don't think that's going to be a big impediment to this. I think you might just have to find a different way to put the signs up where they have to go. This doesn't affect the actual race, right? The race is a different process. So I would urge you to find people who live near here or other places with your signs. And it's fine to put as many of those signs up as you can. So there are options
Yes,
too.
for sure.
It's not saying
Get it on the agenda, and we'll have a week where potentially in those places as well.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The second item that I wanted to bring up is that in conversations with some of the members of council, that the issue of pre-advertising the public hearing to advance the by right ordinance, that's it. That to do that, y'all would need to take action tonight to move to have the public hearing for November 1st. And I wanted to bring that up so that didn't pass by, if that's something that council wanted to do. And it's up to y'all.
And Todd, can I just add to that? So I don't know if you all saw it, but I actually sat down and sent Amy and Todd what I think is a timeline if we're going to get things done by December 20th. And part of that timeline appears to me, based on feedback from Todd, that it really is a crucial component of that timeline to have a public hearing November 1st, rather than normally it wouldn't be until November.
I think
later than that.
Correct.
So I hate to do that, but it would still be after the planning commission meeting. But it would be earlier than waiting until that meeting and then go in 15 days.
The proposed schedule, should council choose to pursue this, that tonight you would set the public hearing date for November 1st. It's weird, you all meet every 14 days, but the law requires 15 days for a public hearing advertising. That's where it usually takes a month, or the process loses 2 weeks. But if y'all were to do that tonight, then on a week from tonight, the Planning Commission will be discussing the issue and making their recommendation, and that and then on October 18th, your next regularly scheduled meeting, that by that time you would have the results of what the Planning Commission has recommended, and certainly could discuss it that night amongst yourselves, not take action. And then the public hearing would take place on November 1st, and then followed by your first reading on November 15th, and then your second reading on December 6th, which gives you an additional 2 weeks before December 20th. You could even do it faster. It is not uncommon to have a first reading the same night as a public hearing. That would be up to council. But this model would be public hearing, the next meeting, first reading, next meeting, second reading, and that would conclude on December 6th, if you pre-advertise the public hearing tonight.
But also, if we have a first reading on November 14th or 15th, 16th, whenever our second reading is in November, it's in pending ordinance at that point if it passes status. So it would.
Yeah,
Is that right, Mayor?
It can be done that way. It's not unless you invoke it. It's not automatically, as I understand it. Mary can address it.
What would we need to do if, like, in that first reading, that we would invoke pending ordinance so that that would replace, so November 14th, or whatever that date is, the date of that meeting, we're
15th.
under that new
15th.
pending ordinance, the 15th, that is new by right. If we vote on it that night and it passes, then we're covered. So if the current strategic planning ordinance expires, this new ordinance gives us that baseline by right commercial.
The two elements are that you have an ordinance that prohibits or allows something that your old ordinance doesn't, and that you've set a public hearing for it. You don't have to have held the public hearing, but I know Todd's put a lot of work into a schedule, so you might want to be sure that you.
So under that timeline, we will have, if we do something tonight, we will have had the public hearing on November 1st, first reading on November 15th.
Correct.
And at that point in time, nobody at the city would be able to permit something that would not be permitted should that ordinance,
Right.
the pending ordinance, pass on second reading or third reading.
Okay?
But the issue is that if we don't pass it on the first reading, or if we amend it, because as I found out reading, if we amend it, it has to go back to the planning commission. Anything other than grammar or spelling. Well, Todd, I found it written right here. I'll read it if you want me to. That any change in something that comes to us, that if we on the first reading amend it in a significant way and it defines it as not grammar, writing, or anything else, it has to go back to the planning commission.
No, it does not.
Well, I'll find it. But anyway, that whole scenario assumes that we approve it on the first reading, and we might not.
Yeah, and we still have the strategic plan ordinance in place until October 20th as well.
No,
If-
December 20th.
December 20th.
Let me ask you, do we have to, I mean, so 15 days from the 11th is like the 26th or 7th, isn't it?
I'm sorry, repeat that, please, John.
If you guys have your planning commission meeting on the 11th, I mean,
Yep.
who's to say we couldn't have a public hearing before November 1st?
Oh, you could. Except for the 11th, I was sticking with your regularly scheduled meetings.
Right.
You could have a call meeting whenever you wanted to, and that would pick it up.
Considering the
Pick up the pace
urgency of
on
this,
it.
I don't know why we would wait till November 1st. I mean, we're trying to, time is of the essence. We've said that numerous times. I mean, you could, the week of the 20th, you couldn't do it on the 25th because that would be 14 days, but you could do it on the 26th or 27th and have a public hearing.
That's correct.
And how will that incorporate the stuff from development strategies into that? You know, I mean, we're just going to address that afterwards, or, because my thought process, we try to incorporate some of that in there. I mean, let me ask you on pending ordinance status too, at the same time. I thought we could invoke that without any public hearing or anything. For example, when we put the moratorium in place, we invoke pending ordinance that night, and there had been nothing through planning commission or through.
I think the planning commission had a hearing on the moratorium beforehand.
It
It has to be the two things, the public hearing and then the substance. Even though that may not be the substance that you ultimately, you know, you may tweak it or you may change things in it, it has to be the substance of the a written, I like it to be written, unless it's just extraordinarily simple, a written ordinance.
And this is the basic by right that's outside, you know, development strategies work is going to focus on Upper College Avenue.
Right.
So we might learn something, but, you know, the basic by right that we, you know, kicked around a little bit, and that Todd now has in a format to go to planning commission. That's, outside. That's going to be what gets plugged in outside of catalyst areas and overlay areas that we will allow, because otherwise, right now, if outside of that, everything outside of the catalyst areas goes back to what it was prior to the moratorium on December 21st.
And I guess what I was trying to wrestle with is, so we put in the basic about right and everything through this, but we know we're going to end up tweaking it somewhat for that specific catalyst area. We can't really exclude that from the about right we put in. So I guess I was thinking we might have a little more information from this process before we totally change.
Well, I mean, theoretically, the catalyst areas or overlays will either, and just like they do right now, without anything else going on, are either going to allow for additional things to happen or further restrict what can happen by right.
Yeah.
So it's not, I don't think that's a pertinent point, because I think we've got to have some level of basic by right across the board.
I agree with that.
That we build on with, that we either, again, build on with an overlay or restrict with an overlay. And that's what development strategies will be talking about, is an overlay for one specific area, but we got a whole lot of other areas that we need to be thinking about.
I've been stressing that for a while.
So, other comments?
So Todd, just to clarify, I'm reading the zoning ordinance right now. I may be wrong. It says, and it's talking about text amendments. If changes other than for grammar, punctuation, or terminology to a text amendment are proposed, the proposed changes shall be resubmitted to the Planning Commission for review and recommendation prior to a second reading or prior to a third reading if the third reading is required. And that's for any text amendments. This would be a text amendment. So why does that not apply?
That if the commission, as they will be, and the council, as you will be, are looking at a broad spectrum of ideas that have been presented related to this ordinance, everything from densities to heights to setbacks to step-backs to architectural detail to the amount of glass, amount of brick, all this will have been discussed. All of that is on the table. Now, if y'all come up with something that is not included in this vast pool of ideas that is being discussed, that would be in keeping with our procedures, that would probably say, well, here's something that nobody's really talked about. It probably ought to go through the Planning Commission. Assuming we're within that same realm of ideas that have already been vetted publicly through the Planning Commission and through the public hearing and through council, that it is my opinion that you do not have to bring that back to the Planning Commission, that you have that, the council has the authority, the right to modify that. And if council, if the Planning Commission says we want to do 10 stories and y'all want to do 6, or some setbacks to be 30 feet and y'all want it to be 2 feet, that's completely up to you. It does not have to go back for any change in the content.
Well, is there other language in this? Because this clearly says to me, if changes other than for grammar, punctuation, or terminology to text amendments are proposed. What you're talking about...
You said are proposed, is that correct?
Text amendments are proposed.
Yeah.
The proposed changes shall be resubmitted to the Planning Commission. Now, we're going to get a fairly specific ordinance from the Planning Commission. My concern is this may end up in litigation, and if we're not specifically following our own guidelines, we're opening a lot of doors. Now, if there's a statement other than this, I'd like to know. But to me, this doesn't give us the wiggle room that if it's an extensive document, we want to change one thing. It doesn't have to. This doesn't say public hearing. It says it goes back to the Planning Commission prior to the second reading. Is there more to this text than just that? I guess I'm asking.
I don't know what to tell you, other than this is how we have always conducted our business in regards to the evolution of an ordinance through the process of the Planning Commission, the public hearing, and council. That if in a meeting, if a council meeting, if a council wanted to propose an ordinance, it would have to go back to This is amending an ordinance that is already in motion, has already been developed and vetted and discussed through the public process. Y'all are amending it, not proposing a new one. If it's an idea that has not been included in the discussion, then it would require an approval, to go back to the planning commission.
But this isn't if it's proposed by us. This is if the proposal that comes to us from the planning commission. Unless I'm reading this all wrong, and I've read this many times, and we may not have been doing it this way, I don't know. But I think particularly given the potential for litigation on this, that we need to be really cautious.
The idea then this becomes even more valuable because you have that extra time in there to review this.
I agree with you. That's why we built it this way.
I think the council has more authority than you might that you may understand or believe that on these matters. That I think that it's y'all have a lot of latitude, and that's. And I'll be glad for somebody to point out that we've been doing it wrong for the whole time you were on the planning commission and chairman. This is how, when I was chairman, this is kind of how we've done it.
But I would rather, in this case, I would certainly rather err on the side of being more cautious.
And y'all can make that determination. Catherine, I agree with you. And that, when the time comes to, if you see what the recommendations are and you feel like that y'all want to completely change this, but I have been involved and at this podium for a decade, and we have always we've done it this way. It's with city ordinances, with zoning ordinances, that y'all can use your judgment. And there have been times where we sent something back to the planning commission because it was a substantive enough change recently. Yeah. But again, and so if it depends on what y'all are including, one of the reasons that it went back was that the scope of what the planning commission addressed was narrowed. Instead of, I think the term that was used at the time was the kitchen sink approach. The idea was, let's discuss all these items so when it comes to you, you can then have the latitude to work within that pool of ideas. That is what will occur with this ordinance, because we will be discussing a wide range of ideas that have come from the council, from Clemson Next, from citizens, from the commission. There's going to be a big pool of ideas, and that it will touch on every idea that I've heard of being discussed related to these ordinances, and the idea being that when it comes to y'all, if you stay within that fairly broad set of boundaries, that it is my opinion you do not have to go to the planning commission, and it will be council's decision if you want to go back to the planning commission for any reason.
This may be a legal issue, but the thing on the agenda for the planning commission next week is not a broad change. It's a pretty specific change. It's not big. So
the discussion.
That's what this discussion is, and I think it's a legal issue, and Mary maybe help us out. But the timeline that you sent me, though, fortunately, is designed for bumping it back to the planning commission. It's actually designed that if after the first reading we have a problem, we have time to give it back to the planning commission after the second. So for this one, it's kind of a moot point, because you gave me the schedule that as long as we do this November 1st, whatever it is, that it has that built into the returning to the planning commission. So it's really, you don't have to solve this tonight. I would like to hear from Mary, because I think this, even if we were doing it incorrectly, but for this, it doesn't matter as long as we move this back, agree to the November 1st hearing, because then there's cushion to go back and back and back and back.
So I think we just answered your question. That's why I was going to chime in. We will be looking to Mary for legal advice. Thank you, Todd, for giving us the explanation. So, you could talk about the scenario. There is buffer, there is room. So I think we do need to move on, unless Mary, you tell us otherwise.
I was just going to point out that this section requires review and recommendation from the planning commission, not a public hearing. So you wouldn't have to have another public hearing. But I think that the key word to me in that section is changes. Let's say you were sent a proposal that had 10 items and you decided we're gonna adopt 8 of them and we're gonna drop 2 of them. I don't regard that as a change to the text of what you were proposed, and I probably would recommend that you not take that back to the planning commission, because you just decided we're not gonna adopt it. But if you made a substantive change, and I think the one that Todd was referring to is the one where the PD 2-acre thing was gonna change, that's a pretty substantive change, and that would be one that you would want to send back to the planning commission. So it'll kind of be fact dependent on what y'all are wanting to do with what comes to you. But to me, the key is changes, that term in that section to me.
Thank you for
But
clarifying.
I definitely think you ought to leave room for that possibility.
Noted. We need any other?
What was on the table was the idea of y'all picking a date and pre-advertising a public hearing for that date.
I was going to ask a question related to Eric's request earlier as well, because Eric was requesting that we move the public hearing up to our next meeting. Is that correct? Which we couldn't do because we don't have 15 days notice.
Correct.
So the soonest that we could do that would be
The 19th.
the 19th would be the soonest that we could have a public, or actually it'd probably be the 20th by the time we advertise tomorrow, right, Andy?
That's right.
Yeah, would be the 20th that we could have a public hearing if we were willing to do that for Eric. And if we do feel like there's urgency, that maybe we could have a public hearing on both those things on the same night. And if we put that on the agenda to do that.
Because, I mean, if we have, my view on the public hearing, with everything going on, there's going to be a lot of comment. There's no doubt in my mind. So if we try to push that public hearing up against our meeting on the 1st, then you're going to have additional comment. I mean, it's just going to be, you might as well bring your sleeping bag.
And then,
so I just, and at the end of the day, out of that public comment we have on, let's say the 26th, whatever date I might have suggested there may be some things in there we want to kind of tweak a little bit. And why don't we give ourselves at least an opportunity to do that versus just pushing it up against the 1st. And for Eric's standpoint too, we can get his situation in there on, again, I put that up, it's either 25th or 26th, I can't remember what days, I think it was a Tuesday. And let's
Tuesday's
just
the
deal with
26th,
it.
Monday's the 25th.
And
So
then-
Monday should be the 26th then, right?
And then we could have the first reading on
November 1st. Say, and
instead of waiting until the 15th.
right. And I think you'd reduce your probably your public feedback might be, some of that may be out of the way, you know, on the 26th versus the 1st as well. So anyway, that's my thoughts.
So Beverly, to add this, if you would like to add it to the agenda, someone just need to make a motion, I assume, just to, okay, just confirming.
So what are we doing?
We're adding
We're adding an item for, in this situation, Tuesday, October 26th, at 2 different public sessions for 2 different items.
We have to add items, set a date for a public hearing.
It's not on the agenda.
No,
that's
but can we not just set a date?
I think it's probably safer, and I would probably, are you set on the 26th, or the 27th would give Beverly a little leeway just in case you could get it right in the paper that first day after the planning commission meeting? Isn't that what you're wanting her to do, is to advertise it on the 12th?
Well, the 26th, by the way, there's a lot going on. You got trick or treating, you got the thing at Patrick Square, so. Do what? The rock, whatever you call that thing. So, I mean, again, maybe the 27th might make more sense, because like I
Would
said,
that work for you?
And can we still get these things on the agenda for the 1st if we wait till the 26th?
so,
Mary
We can
makes
go ahead
a
and
very
put them on
good
the
point that we can't, if the meeting's on the 11th, so the morning of the 12th, we can notify the newspaper, and the earliest possibly we can get it in is the 13th, and sometimes it's not guaranteed it's the next day. So you'd be the 14th, and so that'd be the 29th would be 15 days. To the point someone made about being cautious, that's a Friday. I'm not here that Friday for what it's worth, but, and we could try the 28th, but,
Does the day of notice count, though, as one of the days?
say again?
Does the day of notice count? So if it didn't make it in until the 14th, does that count as that day one? Or is
Well,
that day
it's
zero?
the day that it's published, the first day.
So if it got published on the 14th, worst case scenario, you could have it on the 28th as the 15th day, which is Thursday instead of Friday.
Yeah, and we'll have it teed up, and there's a good chance that it could get,
I think with all this jumping around and moving days and trying to squeeze it, let's just have it on the first. Robert's gonna bring supper. It's gonna be a long night. And that's just kind of part of it. But to me, that just makes more sense. There's built-in flexibility. If we have to have another call meeting at some point in between there because of these things, we can do that. But I think we're trying to take this big old square peg and shove it in a round hole right now by trying to pick up 2 days in there. So that would be my
Are you
suggestion.
talking about a public session on the first?
The public hearing on the first is what we're talking about setting up, and let's just do that on the first.
Two items.
Be two items.
So it's very suggested you go ahead and set up, add it to the agenda.
Yeah. But now, we don't have to add it to the agenda tonight because we've got plenty of time now.
no, you would have to.
We won't have another council meeting.
Still have to add.
Okay, I'm not gonna ask the council meetings the next.
Yeah, the reason I was asking about adding to the agenda is a lot of times when it's in staff reports, we don't add it to the agenda, we just discuss it and advertise a public hearing. So
Right.
this is a little different, that's why I was asking that question.
So, do we have to agree to public hearing, or can planning commission set up a public hearing? Because if it's the November 1st, that's enough time for the planning commission at their meeting next week to set it up. Don't they have the authority to set up a public hearing, or do we have to agree to public?
I'm having a hard time hearing you. Can you lean into the mic just a little bit?
Can the planning commission set a public hearing for November 1st, or do we have to? do
Y'all
that?
set the public hearing
So we
date.
have to do that?
And as Mary said, you just have to set the public hearing date 15 days in advance. You can have a reading before the public hearing date and have it after. And again, I was sticking to the regular, existing meeting schedule. That's where I came up with November 1st. But typically what happens is the commission would make the recommendation, and then on the, whatever the date it is, the 18th, that we would come before you, and that's when you would normally set the public hearing date. Well, now you have to set it to mid-November because of the weird way the days fall. So anyway, this seemed to be an easy
I'm
way.
gonna make it real easy. I'm gonna make a motion that we add an item to the agenda, set public hearing dates on November 1st. We'll add that onto our action agenda at the end of it.
And that could be for
both items, for Eric Newton's property and for the discussion of options coming from planning commission.
Should we do two-thirds?
And as part of your motion, are you finding that there are exigent circumstances requiring that it be added to the agenda tonight?
Well, I think there are exigent circumstances required to be added to the agenda tonight, given our process of the redevelopment of the city of Clemson and adding by-right development for our citizens.
So I have a
With
second.
the November 20th deadline.
The only thing I'm changing, I wouldn't say adding by right, it's considering by right, because we've not agreed that that's going to be focused.
Sure.
But this is just the motion to discuss.
This is the motion to add it to the agenda.
Do I have a second to add it?
Second.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. All right, it's been added, Todd, thank you.
You know nothing but that's a simple time.
trying to help. Really, I was. I think this will help. So that was it for the.
So Todd, let's just keep it going. So I'll go back to, thank you for adding those two items. Now we'll go back to policy action agenda items. Again, public comments are 653-9886, 653-9886, 2-minute limit per speaker. Now we're going to go back to item A, consider second reading of ordinance for text amendment to the city code to create a new zoning district R7.
There have been no changes or input since the last meeting.
Wait a minute. We just added that, but we didn't actually have a motion on the date for the public hearing.
Well, I said November 1st in my motion.
So is it gonna go someplace else in the agenda? Did I
So
miss
it's
that?
added to D. I'm bringing it.
D, I'm sorry.
So I've got it on my nose, Mary. I'm trying
Sorry.
to keep. No, it's good. I'm trying to keep up with myself. All
I
right.
got a little lost, sorry about that.
Todd, go ahead. Anything?
Don't bring any special stuff.
All right. Okay.
Again, there's no changes.
Somebody like to make a motion?
I make a motion that we accept the second reading of 2021-R-03 proposed text amendment R7.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I've just got one question that I want to be perfectly clear on, that in looking at this ordinance, the way that it's written, that it's a very, very, very high bar for anyone to come into an R20 neighborhood or an R12 neighborhood, get the minimum amount of land and have it add a whole lot of additional density. However, I am still I'm a little concerned in looking at this with this being a single family designation, and it seems like we kind of went back and, it goes back and forth between some things that line up with the single family, requirements for setbacks, and then it goes to what we require, the same setback requirements that we have for multifamily housing, which are less. And we go from a 40-foot rear setback in R20 and R12, and I'm not saying that we go to 40 feet, but we go all the way down to 15 feet, which is a significant difference there for single-family homes. Is the one that's making my brain itch a little bit, and in drawing some things out today, actually in R20, you could go, you get about a 50% increase. You could go from 4 to 5 or probably 6 houses in a 2-acre spot within the setbacks.
You could go from 4 to 6?
You could go from 4 to 6 on 4 current R20 lots. In R12, it's almost impossible to increase the density under this. Maybe you might get a little bit, but 4 to 6 houses. And we have heard pretty loudly from people in single-family R20 and R12 that they don't want this to, be something that threatens their neighborhoods. Again, the economics of the situation and most of what we have here make it, we're talking, I think these houses would probably have to be somewhere in the $800,000 to $1 million plus range to actually make it work on a 2-acre plot right now, but I don't know if we wanted to, I just wanted to bring that up to make sure we don't want to think about that rear setback distance would potentially just, again, raise the bar just a bit where this has to be for new things or where you have gotten together, you've assembled a lot of land for this to happen and change a neighborhood where we know that currently folks aren't supportive of that. Most folks aren't supportive of that.
Oh, yeah, Todd's response, he was raising this.
Just a couple of comments that I think are worth considering through this dialogue. One is that, yes, the rear step backs were reduced because the lot size was reduced by 80%. And so you have a much smaller lot. If you continue to require that 40-foot depth, you're going to, render most of the use of this less attractive, and you're going to end up with a lot of very skinny lots, if at all, because you're not going to have the depth to.
Well, it's got to be a 60-foot minimum lot width,
and
so
then
you can't get skinnier than that. Right? You
Well,
can't get skinnier than that. So
Well, no,
the issue is that there's no maximum lot coverage specified in this ordinance. So you can theoretically build a house 8 feet, 8 feet, 15 to 25, and 15. That's a massive footprint. That's a 3,500 to almost 4,000 square foot footprint of a house that you could theoretically
and
put on that lot or close to it. So
and keeping in mind,
I don't hear Todd's answer in totality.
Yeah, so I think that when you start doing the math on this, that it's not as, I think, just frightening as it might seem at first. And second is that this is by right once y'all decide that you want to give that 2 acres in Strode Circle RM7 or R7. Y'all are not going to do that. Nobody, I don't believe there's a council that's going to allow the introduction of something like that in the middle of one of our traditional neighborhoods. And it only occurs if y'all collectively, or at least the majority of you, vote to do that. And so when you think about where this is likely to occur, the idea is to help create a higher density in those areas, hence the recommendations to have the rear setbacks mimic those of RM1 and 2, and for the front setbacks to mimic that of R20 and R12. That was the rationale. You may not agree with it, but I thought it was worth pointing out. And the most important thing is, until 4 of y'all say this is a brilliant idea for this piece of land, and believe me, those neighbors will be standing where I am telling you how they feel about it, pro or con, and y'all will be the only ones that decide whether or not R7 exists. And in other areas where, let's say it's another part of town, it's not an R20 or R12, but it's on RM1 or 2, and you're going, this is exactly the product we want right here. And then you may have regretted by limiting or forcing that bigger setback. Think of it in the context of other than R20 and R12, is what I'm, I guess, suggesting.
Well, that was the other end of the spectrum there, is that you could pick off some of our historic neighborhoods that there's a desire to protect, could get upzoned to this and lead to the other issue.
John, in light of your conversation and in light of what you just said a minute ago, because I get where you are, and I know where the economy is on this. There's no doubt that what you said is a very, very high bar. But at the same point in time, I know we've had this conversation for a number of years. When you think about it, when we talked about R6, and now we kind of moved to R7. I don't know why, if we're kicking it around, you say we wouldn't approve it anyway. Why are we not even just saying in R12 and R20 neighborhoods that this does not apply? This I don't know how else to describe it. In other words, we just can't insert this in these neighborhoods. I guess it's a protection of those two R20 and R12 neighborhoods throughout this community. That's how I see it, and honestly, that's how I want to vote for it.
The way our zoning ordinance is written is you have a select number of parcels of land, and then you have your zoning designations, and that I'm not aware of a parcel of land in Clemson that could not technically be, other than assuming it's got the acreage requirement, that could not be zoned any district. You could put a C district next door to your house, Bob, if council deemed that the right thing to do. And I think the protections lie in the process and the ability for the public to speak and for a body of men and women to make the collective decision, is this right for our community? I think that's where the protections fall in. I could try, and I guess there might be a way, I've never seen it before, where we could say R20 and R12 property cannot be considered for rezoning. And I think you'd have a lot of R20 and R12 property owners, when they realize how restrictive that was on their value and their property, are going to go, I'm not so, thanks for helping, but this doesn't help me. And there'll be others that will be on board. I maybe, the word my grandmother used, awfulizing this, looking at and that's not a bad thing to do at times, but to be thinking of all the bad things that could come from this. You know, if there's trust in the system that this could never come before you until it's gone through for a vote, until it's gone through the planning commission and through public hearing, and y'all have heard the pros and cons of the neighborhoods, all that takes place before y'all even begin to have your first discussion and vote on it. It's pretty well protected.
John? Yeah, I was just really kind of echoing some of the things. I hear what you guys are saying. I mean, I think that is a concern, but having sat up here and heard it when it was R6 and everything else, I can tell you, for infill, you're going to have a really hard time ever getting more people to do that. And I would presume if they did, the situation in the town has changed to a point where it is more desirable. You know, Bob, on the footage, you have to have 60 feet. But so let's just, through my mind, I'm thinking, okay, maybe one of the areas like Riggs or Strode is choosing to do this. Well, if it's a 40-foot rear setback, then they're probably are going to minimize on the skin. I like the opportunity maybe there be a little bit of variance in the width and different things. And you know, I think the fact that we're trying to entice workforce housing in other places in town, and to me, this provides more of an opportunity to do so. Because 50% more housing in those areas means a big thing, and that's where I trust all my fellow council members to look at that property when it shows up and say, you know what, this is the area where we need it. We have this tool, let's use it. I trust that if somebody shows up on Strode Circle right now, that we're going to say, you know what, this isn't what we're going for downtown. This is what we've been here for 10 years. We don't. It's not an automatic pass for it. I mean, we have to support it. So that's just all I'd say.
And I agree, but I mean, 20 years from now, 10 years from now, this council is going to look a whole lot different. The other thing about it is, when you said workforce housing, we need to face the facts, okay, on this whole situation with the land cost in Clemson right now and everything else going on. And we know what's going on in some other areas, and I'm not going to call the names right now as far as the developments we think are coming and all that. But the housing we're seeing now is 400,000 and above and all that, and that's not workforce housing. Clemson is becoming, it may already be somewhat an elitist town, an elite town, because there is no opportunity for workforce housing, and really the only opportunity for affordable housing right now exists within our historic black neighborhoods, and that's more about work, you know, fixing them up, rebuilds, or whatever the case may be, and not new construction. So we're kidding ourselves. So, I mean, all I'm saying is that, you know, and I know that one time R6 was being considered for annexed only, and I mean, you know, do you now make this for annexed only R7? I'm in favor of R7, and I really don't want it to be for annexed only, but at the end of the day, I think we need to afford, you know, take away the economics. I understand that in today's world it's not going to happen, but I still think we need to afford some of our neighborhoods some protections. It's how I'm going to vote.
So if, first of all, you know, zoning is a strange thing. I'm sure whoever did the zoning for the city of Clemson 20 years ago had no idea what the result of that was going to be in many places. And we look back on it and say, why didn't we think about ground floor empty commercial space when we did this? I mean, you just can't anticipate that. And I don't have a strong feeling either way on this, but I think if there are places where we don't want this to be in effect, we should make a way to write this that it's not going to affect those neighborhoods. Now, if we want it just to be annexed places, that's easy. If we don't want, so isn't there not a way to write this to protect, like John, you gave the example, which is the one you gave in terms of Strode Circle or whatever. If we know that's not a place we'd ever want to see this, how can we write this to prevent that from happening? Or is that impossible to do?
To do with the overlays, like from the catalyst areas or something.
Or is there a different way to do it? Right. Can we protect what we are talking about protecting without limiting housing areas where it would be suitable? Like, I don't think any of us would disagree that in annexed areas, this might be a really good thing to have available there. I assume we all agree to that, right? I'm not so sure if we all agree that this should be on Strode Circle. Cost, the economic piece has been crazy. Who would have thought 5 years ago that Bob Brookover's house that he bought for $300,000 would be worth $2 million today, which is probably right. So you can't predict what economics will do because they do crazy things. I think all we can do is try to write something that protects the areas that we think the integrity of those areas is necessary, and open it up to areas where it's not, if that's possible to do. Maybe the planning commission has to look at it, or we need to revisit it. Unless, Todd, you tell me there's just no way to sort of do that. Maybe it's overlays, John.
Well, I was just reminded one thing about annex only. Part of the catalyst for getting this moving again was that piece on Vickery Drive, which was in the city. And this would have been, we all agreed, the perfect product to allow that to move forward. So I do not agree with going to annex only, just because I guess I put my faith in all of us up here and the next ones to come and the next ones to come, that if they were to do it somewhere that we consider undesirable now, that's because the circumstances have changed, whether it be the neighborhood, the city, or whatever. But as long as we have public input and public hearing, the people up here will represent that. So,
My one question is if we could consider something along the lines of, in existing developed R20 and R12 neighborhoods, that there be, you add an additional bar that says, X percentage of surrounding property owners have to approve of the change in zoning as well. That, again, if you did, you could, let's just say, no one expected there to be $3 to $5 million an acre land values downtown, ever. If it gets to the point where someone can come into an existing R20 neighborhood and pay $400,000 or $500,000 per house, and get 4 lots and put 6 massive 3,700 square foot footprint houses with a basement and a second floor that go 8 feet, 15, 25 on those lots that take a little bit of how that affects the properties around them somehow, beyond 4 votes up here, because this council will change next year, it will change 2 years after that, and it'll change 2 years after that. That would be an added protection for changes to those 2 neighborhoods that we've heard that give just a little bit higher bar to cross over before the character of those neighborhoods could be potentially changed in smaller chunks over time.
Do you want to answer the question on the percentage of property owners around? Is that, do you know, or Mary?
Would that be something you could put in a zoning ordinance, that there is a, property owners within X, distance, when it's within a existing developed R20 or R12 neighborhood, would have to?
You probably would, and Mary, excuse me if I'm jumping ahead of you, but my thinking, when I think about these matters, I think about parity. We might think, well, the most important thing is our R20 neighborhood. Commercial properties might say, well, wait a minute, I own commercial property, and that. So the question might become whether or not you can just say this one group of people has to have letters of approval, or it would be every project. And if that's the case, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen in R20 or R12 that you're going to get the majority of people around it to say yes. That's just the way our community tends to work on these matters. So the question is, do you trust the process and the integrity of the body of the council? It sounds like that you'd rather that authority rest to where y'all don't have a say, to where even if y'all think it was a good thing, if these neighbors rally around it, then you don't have a voice in it anymore. So that's... I don't know. But I can explore all these things and come back to you with different drafts.
I guess the only thing I would add is, by doing something like that, could that create a system of inequity? Because then you are deciding which areas can have that vote and which areas do not. And then you're talking about who's engaged and who's not. So that could create a system of inequity if you do allow certain neighborhoods to have that kind of ability to vote, or give that green light versus others. And so I would agree with what Todd just said. If we're going to do that, we have to do it for everything. If not, then we create a system of it.
But this is the only place, all the other zoning categories, 7,000 square foot lot, 7,000, 7,000, 6,000, 3,000, it would be up zoning or equal zoning there, where this would be a significant change, taking character of that neighborhood and bringing it from 20,000 and large and larger lot, sizes down to a very, a different zoning category. The rest, there's not a ton of difference between R7 and CM1 and CM2, until you get to 3 and 4 and 5. So that's where there's a difference in the equitable piece, is because it's significantly changing and reducing the size, scope, and,
But
character of that
I
neighborhood.
think sometimes, though, we may say that, but when it comes to practice, it still can create that inequity in some ways. So I would just, that's the only thing I.
So maybe two suggestions. Maybe we should postpone this to the next meeting, but it's my understanding that we're also going to have soon a housing committee created for the city. That's what I'm saying. Maybe given something like this that's so sensitive, maybe another layer of protection would be getting a recommendation from this housing committee, in addition to the planning commission that would come to this group, which would at least be another layer of people, and again, council makes the decision, but who are studying and dedicated and involved directly in housing from all perspectives to make a recommendation. So maybe there are other things to consider. So if I can make a motion, Robert can accept the motion, if we postpone this until the next second reading, until the next city council.
You have to admit it because we make a motion.
Yeah, we are good.
Second.
We don't want to vote.
You'd have to just vote, no, because it's the second reading.
He can make a motion to amend.
My motion, how would we amend it, though? What would be the amendment?
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
It's on the
Before you
table.
make a motion, I would just say any motion really needs to be clearly defined, because we're just moving this on down the road again. This has been going on for 4 or 5 years now. I know not for everybody up here, but we've hit it again. We kind of thought we had a good point. Planning Commission's brought this to us. What was the vote of the Planning Commission? 5 to, has hit us again with a strong recommendation from the people that we entrust to do the work you're talking about. At some point, I agree things can always be tweaked, but at some point, we just have to make a decision on it. And I'm ready to vote on it tonight. If we can explore ways to make it better, that's great, but we can't just keep treading water on some of these things.
But Todd suggested some things he would look at. So Mayor, does a motion postpone take precedence over a motion on the table? What comes first in the order of motion?
You would know I didn't bring my Robert's rule, but I'll look it up. But if you vote it down, you would have a third reading anyway. That would be another way to go. Have a look at
I'm not even going to ask the question about if we change it, whether it has to go back to PC. But I think the motion postpone may take precedence over the main motion, just the logic of that.
I'm gonna wait till Mary tells us.
Robert, you should know.
I don't know. Rules? Are you kidding me? Yeah, Robert. They're not my rules.
I don't want to vote no.
Using Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, action on a pending question, and so you have the question before you, may be postponed to another time. Alternatively, a motion can be postponed until after a specific event has occurred, such as after an officer makes a relevant report, which it sounded like I heard someone say they wanted a report from the Housing Committee.
But I will be concerned. I will say, the Housing Committee is just down.
No,
here.
I didn't imply that they would be that. That would be the layer of in the future we could do it. And Todd, I thought at one point you said something that I could check.
As an option, because I'm hearing, especially concern on your part, Fran, and you too, Bob, about ways to make this better. There are a couple of options. One is to pass the ordinance you have before you, and then give staff some recommendations. I've heard of several ideas that you'd like us to explore and vet, that we could then, because they are new ideas, they probably, in my opinion, would go back to the Planning Commission. We could run it back through the system and come back to you in a few months with some of these modifications to this. Keeping in mind that nothing's going to get away from you, because y'all still get to decide if there's any R7 anyway. But in the interim, it gives us a foundation and then something to build upon. but that's just one way to close it out tonight and to give council, give staff some clear direction as to what you would like us to work towards.
If we postpone, I would want you to take a look at the rear set, and I'm not saying go all the way to what they are, but somewhere between what our multifamily housing allows and what our single-family housing
Okay.
allows. Again, you're by 60 feet, you're not getting any skinnier than that, but you're probably not getting a whole lot wider than that either. Because then once you go 80 feet on a lot, and, with current R12 and R20,
Depends on what
you
there is.
got to be there 80 by 87 and a half in a perfect world, or 70 by 100. You can get variation, absolutely, but I think that rear setback just needs to be looked at. That will make it, again, a better design, because you can fill up an entire R7 lot inside of those without, or having a lot coverage. I think one of those two things, or a combination of both, need to be considered in a single family neighborhood that's not supposed to be patio homes.
So I'll make a motion to postpone this to our next meeting with that request, and also maybe talk to Shannon or whoever's involved in this housing committee to see if they have an appropriate role, and they may not. I have no idea. They don't exist, but regardless, at least postpone until Bob's issues are discussed.
Mary, so that there's an amendment to, well, I don't even know a second.
This would be an intervening motion, and it would take precedence. It needs a second first before
That's
you.
what I was saying.
I didn't even hear the
and
motion. I can't hear the motion.
So my motion is to postpone this until the next meeting and ask Todd to address the issues that Bob just brought up.
Keep in mind that, that depending upon, if you're talking about changing the setbacks, so far that's the only thing I've heard.
Or lot cover, or having a lot coverage standard.
If we make any of those major changes, will it go back to the planning commission? Will it have to go back to the planning commission?
That's what I was trying to determine, because I don't recall. All of those standards existed when we discussed the standards for this, and all of those standards are in R20 and R12, and some of them are in RM1 and 2. So, in my opinion, they were, because we went line by line with all of these issues, including lot coverage and rear setbacks. And actually, there was discussion about the rear setback with the Planning Commission. I know Elaine had some thoughts on that. And so, in my opinion, that it would not need to go back, because these have all been part of the conversation, Alicia.
My last comment that I'll make, I think it's my last, but I like Todd's plan of passing it and remanding it back with the questions, because two things. One, I don't think anybody's coming and beating down our door with a whole bunch of requests. But two, if somebody it was in one of the areas where we wanted, where we didn't have a problem with these things, whether it be annexation, whether it be a Vickery Drive, we have the ability to act on it. If somebody comes with something, to Bob's point, that in an area where we don't want it without these other protections, then we have the ability to say no. But it gives us the opportunity to go ahead, passing this tonight, but gives us the opportunity to go ahead and move forward if a project in the proper area were to come along, while this council, without any concern of another election, unless some of us all stroke out between now and then, this council has the ability to not move it forward without the clarity and the parameters that have been asked to be looked into. So, I mean, I think that, to me, is a reasonable compromise. We open the door for something that we like somewhere, but we still have the ability to protect everything that John and Bob and everyone, probably Fran, everyone's brought up.
And I don't disagree. I just want to make sure, because some of the points raised have made me think about this the second or third time about where this could happen and how we would address it. So that's all I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Is this where it happens depends on where somebody comes and asks us for it.
We have the opportunity.
And right now, if somebody comes and asks us, let's say Vickery, then based on our conversation last time, we might be amenable to that just like it is. But if somebody comes in another area, where we want the better setbacks that Bob's talking about, or the lot coverage, then we just flat out tell them, hey, we're not moving forward on that, wait until this happens. And we have that ability to do that, but it doesn't slow us up in other areas. I don't think it was, to my knowledge, it was beat your door down to do this anyway. So, that was all.
Was there a second?
There was no second.
No second.
No second. Okay. Is there a second? No. Okay. Well, there is a motion on the table. Any other comments? Discussion?
You never did ask for public comment.
Public comment, sir.
You never asked for public comment on this.
Public comment's always available at any time.
You had to find it.
Thank you.
It's the same goal.
Okay, 8673. Thank you, John. 8673.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Linda Dove. I was just calling in. I'm very concerned about the R7 zoning, and I'm sorry I missed the first reading, but, the thought of infilling in the R12 and 20 neighborhoods, I think is a very important point. Now, listening to the discussion, and I guess it was Todd saying he couldn't imagine infilling or allowing the infill of R20 and 12 and 20 neighborhoods. I guess that's what you said. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But, you just don't know what's going to happen in the future. And as we discussed, the people that made the plans 20 years ago or whenever, and the things we've seen happen in the past 5 years, they never thought that was going to happen. They never knew it was going to happen. So, to just discuss everything in today's dollars and what would happen and what's acceptable and what your council would do, I think is, we're not looking in the future. And I want to just really consider that, if we do end up passing R7 and then our R20 neighborhoods or R12 neighborhoods, but particularly the R20, that, it results in just pockets of high-density housing, and to do that, they just bulldoze the area, and you're sitting there with your house beside, a high-density development. That's just wrong, in my opinion. So I don't want to downplay the possibilities of what R7 infill can do to our existing neighborhoods. And we know our plans are trying to protect our neighborhood, our single-family neighborhoods, and we really need to look at that. So I know back in 2020, Todd Stedman had been trying to get the Planning Commission to look at R6, and he was doing that from just for newly annexed land. So my question is, why are we not doing this just for newly annexed land? Because, if we're thinking council isn't going to agree to an R12 and R20 neighborhoods being turned into R7 neighborhoods, then I want to know what we're gaining from this. And because I really do not believe this is going to increase workforce housing in Clemson. So those are my thoughts, and I appreciate your discussion.
Thank you for calling in.
Again, I just want to say, I am in favor of us having R7. It's too much like CM1 in this case, where you can have patio homes and you can do other things. It's not distinct enough again. Outside it, I do like the architectural standards and not having to have those beside each other. Again, and like David Allison likes to say, there's a blunt instrument, aspect to zoning rules. I think the lot coverage to maintain, you could make, if you're going to make, again, patio home development, something like that, you can do all of those. Otherwise, here, what we're getting is basically we're allowing for extremely large patio homes that could potentially, as the economics change, happen in pockets of existing neighborhoods that would significantly change the character of those neighborhoods without a lot coverage and those kind of things. And that's what I'm asking, is that we consider a lot coverage standard, whether it be, okay, I get it, that, the setbacks, I can live with the setbacks, but a lot coverage standard, I think, would go a long way to making this different from CM1 and make it more like what I see as a single-family whole that we have within our zoning classifications that are available to developers.
I think we've had a robust conversation. I would call it to a vote with the caveat that we remanded back to Planning Commission for somebody to change, assuming it passes, that we remanded back to Planning Commission for somebody to change.
I would be
dimensions.
comfortable with that if to vote tonight on what's here with this goes back to Planning Commission to consider and recommend a lot coverage standard
But we have
to
this
apply to
as a
R7 to come back forward. I'm comfortable with that and would support this as it's written tonight.
I agree.
called
But if
for-
there is a call to vote, I gotta get a second. I'm learning
Yeah, I
over
know.
the years. I need a second for that.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All right, any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion that as is will consider second reading of ordinance text amendment for the city code to create a new zoning district R7 with the many different comments going back to planning commission. I'm adding that, but all in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Okay.
And I will, to make certain that I'm understanding and following the wishes of council, I will send a summary of what you want me to be looking at as we advance it. I think I heard everything, but just to make sure I got it right, I'll send something out to you guys. Thank you.
And I'm okay with just the lot coverage standard.
Okay.
The lot coverage being
Does
added
anybody
in.
else have anything, if I other than the lot coverage standard? Is that
Great
good?
suggestion.
I think basically the synopsis has come down to that. So, thank you, Todd. Appreciate it. All right, so the next item B, is consider second reading of ordinance to require persons or entities desiring water and or sewer service at locations outside the city whose corporate boundaries may be provided. Such service at the city's sole discretion must submit a petition or annexation or execute an annexation covenant to run with the property or above. Andy.
There have been no changes since last reading.
I'm going to say some words. I'll make a motion that we approve second reading under policy action ordinances, section B, as presented.
Okay. Second. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. All right. Consider first reading. Next item is the first reading to repeal the current business license ordinance and replace it with the 2022 model business license ordinance required by the South Carolina Business License Tax Standardization Act 176. Beverly.
years, but we have taken our ordinance out, which council has all of us for years adopted the wrong ordinance. So this is really just an update for us. We've got our ways in this ordinance. There's a few things that are added, it's just more clarities and definitions and things like that, but we really just done the same process, not even really change for us. We've already adopted the calendar year for the business license, year before the license. So those two we're just on step 5, and we have to take 4, that's another step, but we're all assuming what's with that.
Any questions for Beverly? All right. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Move that we consider a first reading to repeal the current city business license ordinance and replace it with the 2022 model business license ordinance as required by SC Business License Tax Standardization Act 176.
Second. Okay. Any further discussion?
Good work on all this, Beverly and staff and everybody. I know this has been crazy.
Great comment. Thank you. All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Well, I'm going to say it's unanimous, sorry. Item, now it's easy. All right, before we go to item D, I'm going to give the opportunity for Parks Pete, Parks Rec. You've been here for 2 hours. I'm going to probably, and if you're a facilitator, let's fall over here. Otherwise, please do not feel like you have to stay. So you've heard a lot of agenda items. There you go. Thank you. Have a great evening.
That was a test. None of y'all were supposed to get up and leave. I was going to say, yeah.
There goes your A.
Thank you for coming. Have a great rest of the week. Yeah, so now we're going to go back to item D that we added to the agenda item earlier, Mary. So I'm looking at you too, just to make sure. And so right now there is on this is consider by right for a public session meeting on November 1st. That's it at 5 o'clock. Is that, we didn't tell us the time, but I assume it's at 5 o'clock. As well as a rezoning discussion for the corner of Berkeley and Highway 93. I don't know how else to describe that. Does somebody else have a suggestion on what I'm supposed to say there?
It's just that triangle y'all
The
consider.
triangle right there at the corner of 93 and Berkeley.
At Cambridge Creek, I guess.
Cambridge Creek. Okay. All right, so it's been added. So would somebody like to make a motion? No, it's been.
Can we add those? Do we have to give each of those a specific time, or can we add them as 2 items to be considered at the same time and maybe do Eric's first, and then if that doesn't take a long time, then we've got additional time if the other
I
has.
think you would just say one to begin at 5 and the other begin immediately following.
Okay, yeah.
That's not
Or whatever the time is.
You think 5's going to give us enough time?
Well, what you would do is if it didn't give you enough time, you could start your council meeting and then use part of the public session for part of it. I mean, I think a public hearing is limited to 2 hours, is that correct? There's a time component in there in our ordinance somewhere, I think, where the length of the meeting is, and it even says how long the opposing sides had to present. But to answer your question, I think you could start then, if you had to run into our meeting, run into it, but just keep the time in total within the scope of that.
All right, so
But,
what I'm
but
hearing.
I would like us to consider each request separately. Because I say the
Oh, yeah,
rationale
yeah.
for one, not the other.
Okay, so,
Yeah, just saying that the
when
timing of it.
If you are making the motion, please say the time, which we're in, and you may want to say 4:30 for one, the first one, and then the next one at 5, whatever. I'm just suggesting.
Here,
Is that
I
too-
would like
is
to.
that too
I think 5's fine, because that gets us to 7 if we bleed into public hearing, or public session, that kind of thing. Move that we add a public hearing to include 2 items. The rezoning request for the property on the corner of Berkeley and 93, presented by Eric Newton, to begin at 5 o'clock. Immediately following, we will begin the public hearing for the by right. What's that? To consider by right residential allowances in the C and CM districts.
Second.
Any further discussion? Yes.
Actually, 2 separate things. I don't think we should do that if the planning commission does not make a recommendation next week. Because otherwise, if not, we're going to have a public hearing on something that could very well not be what comes to council. In other words, the planning commission meets Monday, not on, well, actually on Eric's also, on both those. And I guess I'm suggesting I don't see the value of a public hearing if the planning commission postpones it to the date after the public hearing, only because what the planning commission sends to us may not at that point be the thing that the public hearing's on, because they could change both what the by right is and what Eric's is, in which case we have a public hearing. It's not a hearing on the thing that actually comes to us from the planning commission.
It won't get published until after the planning commission meeting. So what they
Well,
come
that's
out
what I'm saying.
with
But I'm
is
saying,
published.
if we approve doing this, I would say we only do it if the planning commission on Monday approves, or even disapproves, it doesn't approve, acts on the
Yeah,
actual
we could just, all we're doing is author, they just wouldn't advertise and we wouldn't have it, or we would just have
Well,
it.
but I want to be clear on that. If there's not a decision
Pending,
from-
so I'd
from
like,
the
do I
planning
need to make a
commission-
motion to amend the motion to say pending action by the planning commission?
pending a decision, because their action could be to postpone a decision, which does not put the agenda, doesn't make the planning commission approve or disapprove. They just, if they choose to move it forward to their next meeting, what's going to be the purpose of the public hearing if they haven't actually approved it?
I think you can wordsmith the motion to say that we have a meeting, public hearing beginning at 5 o'clock to deal with the Eric Newton property, followed immediately by the planning commission if they choose to push something forward. Otherwise,
If they make a recommendation.
otherwise we just have it just a Newton property. We'll enjoy the supper while it brings us into
Is
the meeting.
that what you just
Yeah,
said?
pending a recommendation by planning
Yeah,
commission.
that's basically what you just said.
Okay.
And my second concern, maybe my
So wait, we got amended motion. Sorry, Fran. We got a second for that?
Second.
Okay, thank you.
So
Further?
my second concern, maybe a bigger one, is actually the same comment you made about the race. I don't see the point to rushing Eric's beyond the usual queue. I understand there's some economic need. I think on the first case, it truly is crucial that we get to that business because of the timeline in terms of the sunset and everything else. I don't understand why we'd want to set this precedent of moving dates because of a request that's not truly necessary. I understand there's maybe some economic reasons for doing this. At least is Eric still here?
No, he's not.
But I don't see why we want to get in the habit of doing that unless there's really a compelling reason. I didn't hear a compelling reason.
I guess to me, we're very familiar with this, already been through here, has run the process. Eric's economics, those were his economics, those aren't the city's, but I feel like it's something that we're familiar enough with personally.
First, I think the time to voice that would have been when we voted to add it to the agenda. First of all, when we went through that motion, and second, he actually requested that it be done sooner. This is a timing thing. If our meeting was, our next meeting was a day early, so I don't think it was an unreasonable request to be heard.
So we get to vote on it next.
Yeah.
All right. Further comments, discussion? All right. All in favor of the amended motion, raise your right hand. Okay. No reason to say opposed. All right. Now we're going to other policy items. And Rick, I don't know if the caller stayed on. Yes. Oh, wow. I'm impressed. So, we will start with consider approval of an agreement for legal services between the city of Clemson and Mary McCormick, attorney at law. Andy, you will start this discussion. We'll bring in the caller first after that.
Okay, this contract here is, as we discussed in executive session last week, the one change was made that you guys requested. The one change was made that you guys requested, and that was for annual review performance, the way things are going.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. And then we're going to give council the caller. What the last? 9416. Thank you, Rick. Thank you for staying on the line. You have
Name and address.
yeah, name and address and what you would like to say.
Oh, yes. Thank you for your time. My friends call me Ed. Feel free to call me Ed. The actual address being listed is 1146 Old Central Road. This is actually a notice for Miss Mary McCormick. She explicitly violated the Sixth Amendment on October 1st. This is in addition to the not so clear violation conducted last year by her, a violation of the Sixth Amendment, denial to right to a trial. This in and of itself constitutes that she should not be actually continued by the city of Clemson in the position of city attorney. This doesn't even cover the other illegal activities she has been involved in, to include but not limited to violation of the Second Amendment, right to bear arms, and violation of the Fourth Amendment, illegal searches and seizures.
Okay, I couldn't hear everything there. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if Andy, could you hear that?
No, I couldn't catch a name or a location.
Okay, so look, I'm sorry to ask this again. Your name again?
Yes, again, my friends call me Ed. Feel free to call me Ed. I've been in contact with this situation for over a year about addressing public endangerment, and it's been obstructed by the efforts of Miss Mary McCormick.
And the address?
The address on file is 1146 Old Central Road.
I'm familiar with this case, and I'd be happy to address it, but I don't discuss pending cases in public. But if you all would like an executive session, I can share with you more about that.
All right, we appreciate you calling in, and we got the address. Did you hear that, Robert? Okay. So now council's opportunity.
There's a question now.
No.
Does the state word that there's a pending case?
No, we appreciate the public comment, and we take that into consideration. Thank you very much for calling in. Yes, sir.
Well, that's a problem because the information provided is there is no pending case.
This gentleman has one pending case. He has one case that was disposed on September 29th when he did not appear at a bench trial.
Okay, so with that said, thank you for calling in. And what we do limit the comments. We appreciate you staying on the line and sharing your comments tonight. Would somebody like to, first of all, make a motion on consider approval of an agreement with legal services?
Make a motion we approve an agreement for legal services between the City of Clemson and Mary C. McCormick, Attorney at Law, LLC, as presented.
Second. Okay, now, further discussion? All right.
Thank you for caving into our one request after the last meeting.
All
It's
right.
more than fine.
So no other comments, discussion? All in favor, please raise your right hand. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary, for allowing us to go through, like John just said, add to the discussion. We appreciate it very much. Next item B is consider repealing the curbside pickup parking spaces program council enacted in response to the COVID pandemic. And Andy, I believe you're taking over for Lindsay here.
Yeah, I've had some businesses report that they would prefer now that the restrictions that were placed on certain businesses at the beginning of the pandemic, such as hours of operation, occupancy limits, those have all been repealed. To help those businesses out, you guys allow each business to have 2 public on-street parking spaces that can be used for curbside, pickup, or delivery drivers, so that they could supplement their business. Well, with those restrictions gone, we've had requests to have those revert back to public parking. And that was discussed at the Economic Development Advisory Committee. The recommendation was to do that. The other thing they wanted to consider was moving forward were allocating batteries of 15-minute spaces that could be available to anyone for a similar purpose that wouldn't be specific to any particular business. That's one of the things we're going to be talking about on the 14th.
I was gonna say, it seems like there's a need for something, because delivery is not going away.
Right, but the only difference is these would not be exclusive to anybody, maybe for anyone else.
Okay.
Maybe we could revise what the second arrest.
I make a motion that we repeal the curbside parking spaces program council enacted in response to the pandemic, and I would make it effective Friday to allow time for any planning or anything someone's done and notification.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion, comments? All in favor, raise your right hand. All right. Last is consider any amendments necessary for the current mask ordinance. Andy, you're going to lead this discussion.
This is just your meeting placeholder that allows you to revisit the ordinance each time you meet.
Well, we've got 2 of them, and I would say let's tackle them one at a time, because I would suggest we repeal the school one, and my reason being, schools now have the ability to put one in place. So when we kind of did that before, it was so the state had removed that ability from them, so we stepped in and said, all right, state, you're kind of reaching around the school district, we're going to take action. Well, at this point, because of the rulings. The school district has the authority, and in my opinion, they have the best information for their schools and to manage their business on an ongoing basis. I'll actually make a formal motion, we repeal the first mandate on the schools.
Second. Okay, now, further discussion, comments?
Have the schools requested us to do this? Has there been a request from the schools?
There's been a formal request from the schools.
Informal request?
Not that I'm aware of.
I would like to, I would be in favor of just postponing that until our next meeting to allow the public and see what the schools do and allow the public to weigh in, because if the school system like Greenville says no, but we have an overwhelming number of our citizens who continue to say that they are in favor of that mask mandate, I think that we should give them the opportunity to provide that feedback before we make the decision on that piece.
Let me throw a little information at you. I'll be brief. If my counting is correct, the ordinances will automatically expire on the 19th of October, which would be the day after your next meeting. So you would have that. The other thing is, and I have not been able to determine this, the governor filed an appeal of the federal case, or he filed what's called a notice of appeal. I have been all over the Fourth Circuit website, and I can't find where any hearing has been set or anything. Their next hearings aren't scheduled to be until the end of October. So, and he wasn't on that list, so I don't know unless they have some sort of exigent hearing. If the Fourth Circuit ruled against this judge or overruled this judge's order, then you could do it either way. You could either reconsider, putting an ordinance in place at that point in time, or we might know more by the next meeting, the next council meeting. But that's just something I'm not able to predict right now as to how the Fourth Circuit's going to handle that notice of appeal.
I just think it's out of our purview. I think that's the school board's decision at this point.
Yeah, I was going to agree with Bob, because I know you said schools can make the decisions, but the school board will make a decision for all Pickens County. And I know for Clemson Elementary, the parents and what they experienced, they were truly thankful for what we had done. And so I would be remiss if we decided to revoke that one without having all of the information, because what they do for other parts of Pickens County doesn't impact Clemson Elementary. And so I would caution us to just remove it at this point, or discontinue that mask ordinance until we get more information. And then I was going to suggest, say what Mary just said, is that there's still possible appeal from that decision, and that could change within the next couple of days or so. So how do you want to know?
So, I think two things. Certainly agree with what you just said. School districts at this level, Clemson Elementary School is local and they have different needs. I think it also would be a bad optic if we walked out of here tonight and we've overturned that, and there's been no public discussion. It was not on the agenda. There was no opportunity for anyone to give us input, and no one apparently has.
It's on the agenda. We couldn't do it.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, no, I'm not saying we couldn't vote, but I'm saying to vote to end the ban in the school that was not announced anywhere whatsoever is I don't think, a fair way to do it. So I would suggest that we wait, publicize it. Well, the next meeting, when it runs out, I think we need to make people aware if that really is going to be a consideration. Not that we don't have the right to vote without doing that, but I don't think it's the right thing to do. And if they want to come to the meeting, if the school board does, or get more information, I think it would be an unfair thing to leave here tonight doing an action that is not even publicized. No one, as far as I know, including the school board, has asked us to do this. I don't think we lose anything by waiting 2 weeks to our next meeting, but I would suggest if we're going to do that, we do make it known that that is part of the discussion.
I mean, I'm with you, John. Someone else have
Everyone down. Yeah, so Bob, you go
Yeah, I mean, I do want to make it, because I agree with you 100%. It is in their purview. Now, it could get pulled back, pending a court order. But I would prefer us to put it on the agenda for next time clearly that we are going to consider a motion to, or we're going to have the ability to consider a motion to end the mask mandate in schools at the next meeting, so it's clear and that the public could weigh in on that, rather than it happening tonight when no one's here, no one's on the line, and even though that's on the agenda, it's very different, you know, and wide ranging. So I would just prefer we wait. I'm with you. I think it's out of our purview for the time being, but that also gives us a little more time and space to see what happens with appeals and to let the public weigh in on what their desires are for that area.
If we don't do it tonight, I mean, I go back where John, I'm with you, John, on this all the way. I mean, we've taken on the responsibility of the school board. I mean, Greenville's already ruled, others in the state have ruled. Oconee, not that it matters, but Oconee's ruled as well. And so, I mean, essentially, we're doing their job. They need to do their own job. But at the same time, I'll say this, it needs to be loud and clear on our agenda next time around that this is going to be a discussion. And at the end of the day, if there needs to be input, we want to hear it. And because I can tell you right now, I know where I'm going to vote tonight. I know where I'm going to vote in 2 weeks.
Catherine, did you want to say anything?
No.
Okay. Just making sure. I was kind of going around. I'll add.
Robert, do you have any sense for the percents in the schools? I mean,
That's what I was just looking for. Actually, that's where I was burying my nose in the data.
So let's all keep
I
it.
already made a motion, so there'll be a secondary motion to postpone.
Yeah, it would be.
I mean, the whole point of having it on the agenda every time, so we could do this.
So I was just asked a question about the latest at the all of school district. It is less than 1%. That's over 16,000 students. Thankfully, it's tracking at a much lower level than it was months ago or months ago. So I do know that much. I haven't gotten a chance to chime in, but I will say that, I mean, I even wrote this down. The South Carolina Department of Education has given school districts the discretionary authority to require masks. It puts that decision in the hands who are responsible for the education and the ultimate responsible for protecting our children.
right.
So I totally, I have to say that, but, I see that, it's on the agenda, and we want to make sure everybody fully aware that we're considering this. I can support that as well, because I can say it's on the agenda that we are considering. I do want to add, we're talking about these two separate ones. Daycares are also a part of this. We keep on saying schools, however we're saying. Just keep in mind, daycares are also a part of this ordinance that we split up. So I think there was a recommendation for postponement. I say recommendation, motion. Did you make a motion?
Yeah, I want to make that motion. But again, and I want to say, the agenda item is consider any amendments, which is very different than consider suspending, doing away with the mask ordinance. So, and again, there's two different ones. So my motion is that we postpone.
You got to vote on this motion first. John made a separate motion on this, right?
No, he can make a motion to suspend.
To suspend.
So it's what he's doing right now. So if you can.
I thought you already made it, to be honest.
He said he was wanting to. So was it technically?
To postpone.
Oh. So thank you. See, we're at almost 9 o'clock, and this is what happens to me.
Yeah, I made a motion for a second, and Bob made a motion to postpone it.
But nobody
Nobody seconded.
Nobody
Bob.
seconded my motion.
Okay. Do I have a second for the postponement?
I'll second it, but yes. What's the difference between postponing it and just putting on next meeting's agenda?
Because we already have a motion on the table.
No, I know, but no one, I'm just saying, what does postponing do less involved?
To your point, you could just vote no on that and put it on next week's
Right, so,
agenda.
I mean,
Yeah, we could
Either
clarify.
way.
We could just vote no. I could
Postponing.
withdraw my motion, and if it.
Postponing does the same thing, is what I'm saying.
Basically, vote no, but you don't have to postpone, you just vote no.
I'm fine with the postponing, I just want to be clear that just means that nothing different. Well, it'll appear differently on next week's agenda.
Yes.
Postponing.
Yeah, it gives us the ability to clarify what.
I don't even know what you're saying.
It's not important.
We're fine. We're just gonna. We have a motion on the table. We're gonna vote on that since we're taking. We didn't get a second. We got a second.
We did get a second, so we got to vote on that motion now.
Okay, so we're voting on the postponement until
The next regular meeting.
which is what day?
October 18th.
October 18th. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So, all in favor of the postponement, raise your right hand. Okay. Any opposed? Okay. So now we have the motion itself.
passed the motion to postpone.
Yeah, so actually, we're fine. Okay. So now we're going to go discussion of the second ordinance. So,
I think the same thing. I think we should repeal the current face mask ordinance if you want to give it to Friday or something to notify businesses. But, you know, I pulled up the last 7 days for Pickens County, and we're down to 461 per 100,000, so that's 0.46% of people, 580 cases in the county total in those 7 days, 52 cases in the 29631. The wastewater's fallen off. And we've said this, we've paid lip service to this, but the enforcement of it is a nightmare. It's a challenge. We put our officers in a terrible position, responding to calls from public. So now you've got people out there trying to take pictures and stuff. I mean, we're at a really good level in our community. The university's numbers are good. Our numbers are good. I just don't think this was designed just to stay out there. So at some point in time, it's got to come off of there. So that's kind of where I am on that.
Same thing, I would like to have it clearly stated on the agenda what we're doing at the next meeting, that's what we're considering. I'm with you, I like the numbers. The university did today announce that they are, even as good as the numbers are there, they are continuing their mask ordinance through the 30th at this point, because outside, even in Pickens County, our number was previously that the cases had to be less than 200 per 100,000. I think we're still above that level significantly. So again, I'm probably in favor as well, but I'd like it to be clearly stated on the agenda.
I'll agree. I won't even say all the same metaphors about finishing the race, pulling off the parachute, jumping. We know the metaphors. I think we can wait 2 weeks, be patient. And I was going to say the same thing about our number per cases. You're right, it's 2 more weeks of difficulty, although I'm in grocery stores, a lot of people wear masks, and we're in the habit now. I just assume do the 2 weeks. John, I agree with you, the numbers are spectacular. I think that's reason to rejoice, but not to reject it. And then, the same reasoning, I think people need to know it's on the agenda as a specific item. If you go the same route, postponing it, that's what I would urge us to do. If the university said they think they're going to keep doing it, and their numbers are spectacular, I don't see the benefit of waiting 2 weeks. But
You don't see the benefit of
waiting 2 weeks? It's the same. It's the same thing.
I think one of the reasons too is because of flu season, because you have flu and COVID-19, and so this is also one of the reasons that they wanted to keep that, because I'm part of that EOC, those meetings, because our antibodies, because we were probably not impacted by the flu, this could be a really bad season flu-wise, which is why I say get your flu vaccines as well. So I would caution anyone to put it on the agenda once again before we just take everything off, because our numbers could also be very, very good because we are being good stewards and doing our due diligence to government. And I know it's uncomfortable because I have to go to our buildings and the academic buildings and say, put your mask on. Put your mask on. As soon as I walk past, they take it off, and I come back and I say, put the mask back on. And you're going to have to leave. So I know about frustration, but I think it's helpful to continue.
Fran, before we come to you, just what Fran, before we come to you, just John, Catherine.
No, I think that I've seen the numbers go down. I've been doing contact tracing at Tri-County just because I wanted to see how it worked, and we went from 30 people handling more than 50 cases a day. This is just contact, not always actual cases. Exposure to I don't even know how low the number's been, but it has dropped off. I do have concerns because now I'm talking to 95% of the people who have also not been vaccinated. So, yeah, I'm still uneasy, but then I come to John's point that at some point we've done everything we can, and we have to figure out what the next steps are going to be.
Any other comment? All right, before I go to Fran, I'll just John.
There's no votes. I can count votes. I know it's not going to pass.
There's no
We're just
motion.
having a robust discussion.
Well, you know how 3 of us feel. Let's leave it
All
there.
right, so Fran, just
I can say, and don't forget the most important reason. If you wait 2 weeks, I'll have my 3rd vaccination. So do it for me.
all right. So there was no motion. All right. So any other comments, discussion? All right.
But we are going to do that as a specific agenda.
Yeah. No,
Specific agenda.
That's been noted. Yes. And Mayor, council,
Is there anything to public comments?
go ahead.
Your motion was for the total repeat, or just schools?
I did school,
That was
there
the-
were
that
two
was
separate
the-
ordinances out
there was
there.
two
So I did
separate. We
school.
didn't have a
I count the
motion
votes
for-
on the second one, and I know it's not gonna pass, so I'm gonna.
But what's on the agenda is supposed to be just removing the schools.
No,
No,
that'll be for both.
You need to put two items on the agenda.
It'll be
One for
both.
school and one for
But
the.
Andy, there was no motion for the second. Well, we have two orders for the unique, specific essential services that we have.
Yeah, there'll be two items on the agenda.
Two items that say we're gonna consider ending the mask ordinance for schools
There you go.
for essential.
It's just going to give you guys a little bit of, I don't know if you want to call it firsthand knowledge or anything on these topics. I've got a daughter that goes to daycare, because you mentioned the first part to consider that. I don't have anybody in school, so I don't know how they're handling this specifically. But I can tell you, when you said consider also what's going on with the daycares, they do really do the best they can. But honestly, if you think this mandate is helping keep the spread down between anybody in daycare, it's not. By 9 o'clock, those masks are off.
Right.
And they're doing all they can to help. So it's not doing anything to make somebody fearful that maybe I get caught doing this, that, or the other, one more thing to worry
But it
about.
was never about the kids in that case, it was about the adults who, I mean, like.
Well, then we could have not required the kids to wear it, but it's in that law, they have to wear it.
Yeah, it's in there for 2 years and older.
I know what it says, but it was not about forcing it on day. That was never the problem. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Also, I was going to say that if on the agenda there is considering any amendments to this thing, and what you were getting at is amendments you could possibly make to it is, I went to East Park printing to get some stuff out. There was me and 2 people in that entire building, and we had to wear a mask. But if you go to Tiger Town, there was 40 people in there drinking, eating, high-fiving, you don't have to. I'm not saying mask mandates don't work or anything, but the one that we have doesn't do it.
Well, East Park Printing would not have been an essential service under, that was their store's choice if they had you wearing.
That was the store's
That was the
choice.
store.
That was the
Well,
business.
they had to sign up or whatever, and so I assumed it was under.
That's because
mandate.
ours is the grocery stores, gas stations, medical.
They had to sign up, so I assumed it applied. But just saying, like you said, with the enforcement's a nightmare. Nobody wants to start a fight with anybody. I guarantee you, I'm gonna have more harm by getting punched in the face than by walking by 5 people if I don't know they have COVID or not. So I don't think if you're worried about the mandate helping, then it should just blanket everybody. And that's the only way to do it, because if you pick it up in Tiger Town, you're going to take it to Publix.
Thank you.
Appreciate the comment. All right, so mayor, council reports, comments, new business.
Speak fast.
Oh, Fran?
So
Yeah.
just quickly, the next conversation with council is the 28th. And if you have any suggestions on where we might have that, the numbers weren't great, but I heard it was a good conversation this past week. But it's 28th, so whoever wants to go, if you let me know. And if you have a location, a church, school, a meeting space, maybe we need to start going more neighborhood by neighborhood. We can do that. But anyways, let me know if you want to go on the night of 28th. This time, it was scheduled for 1 hour, which I think was plenty of time, right? For 6
If you want to move it around, I'd make a suggestion of doing almost by voting precinct, or at least a major precinct. That puts you downtown, puts you at Abel, puts you at University.
We could do one at the Lutheran Church easy. But,
What's that district?
that's going to be that's a precinct.
That's a
joint
precinct.
university.
So can you arrange that for that night?
I'm a member. I can make that happen.
Can you arrange that for that night, for the 28th? Oh, good. So let's do that.
We'll talk about it. Okay.
But anybody can come, but we'll focus on that.
But just let me know. We'll talk about it.
All I have to say is to add the Fran real quick, but this is 15 seconds. Thank you, Andy. Thank you to your team. If there's been some, I would quantify as low-hanging fruit that have been addressed. Even the limited people that have been there, that's been really nice to see address how quickly you've done it. It's been very impressive, and the whole team. So thank you, John. That was it.
That was it. I just wanted to throw out.
All right.
Wait. When we think Sesquicentennial launch will be January 18th, which is the Tuesday, the day after MLK Day. So that's when we will be meeting. And so we will do something a little bit beforehand to launch the Sesquicentennial celebration.
All right, and the last thing before we adjourn, somebody can make that motion. Chief's still here. Thank you for representing our community last week. If you did get a chance, the 10 at the top, he spoke, represented the community very well about technology, and we appreciate him sharing his expertise and taking the time. I know the 2 of us heard it, and so we appreciate it. So thank you very much. Yes.
I would just tag on, Chief. Thank you and your whole police staff, because coming in the middle of COVID, turnover, building projects, or anything going, I don't think people realize you and your officers, all of you, what a difficult time you all have had, and the challenges to move through, mandates, different things, so I think I speak for everybody when I say thank you very much to all of you and your officers for what y'all.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, we have a motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor, raise your hand.
What was your feet tonight?